You are listening to More Than a Sniff, a weekly podcast of Western States Canine College. I'm Joe, owner and principal trainer here with my colleagues Chris, Michelle, and Shannon. Today, we are going to talk about the choices that you have when you take your dog to the veterinarian and things to ask for, things to watch for, and ultimately that it's your choice. And we have some personal experiences to share as well as experience that clients have had, and also Shannon, being that she came from most recently the vet industry. She's got the most experience with some different things to watch for and to help you be successful when you're taking your dog to the veterinarian. But first, I'd like to talk about, we are doing an online training platform that allows you to log on and watch videos and train your dog on your own time, and with a lot of help from our staff here. As you join in the membership, you will be able to earn certificates and badges and also have open conversation about training. And our goal is to help everybody understand that everyone is a trainer at the end of the day if you own a dog. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about your choices at the veterinarian, and when you should go and when there's other avenues to go in. So we're going to start with Chris and just have Chris share some of his experiences with some of the vet stuff that we've gone through with ours.
Well, I'm going to start by being the fun police.
Okay.
So just a standard disclaimer. None of us here are veterinarians, and so any advice that we give, follow up with your vet. The advice that we give is from the experience we have with our own personal dogs, with our clients' dogs. So just, if you ever have any questions, obviously make sure that you follow up with your own personal vet. So our dogs, recently, in the last 2 weeks, Joe and I were faced with the ultimate decision with one of our dogs, Mitt, who was our Italian Greyhound. And in fact, I think our very first podcast, we were chuckling about Mitt being outside and realistic expectations. And unfortunately, we had to make that decision to put him down. And it doesn't come easily. We've held hands with clients going in and doing the same thing. It's not an easy conversation. You're clouded with emotions, obviously. Who wouldn't be? It's never an easy decision. But Mitt had, I don't know the technical term for it, but basically he had a blood disease, and he had an episode a couple of years ago and made it through it. He was at a 48-hour stay at the vet, and they gave him fluids and wrapped him in warm blankets and whatnot. And it's really quite a disgusting thing, actually. He bled internally, and it's coming out of everywhere. And the little guy doesn't have an ounce of fat on him to spare, so he crashes pretty quickly. And from the time that we saw him, I saw bloody throw up, that he was just really crashing fast, hard, and in a few hours span, he was just almost 100% lethargic, and we took him into the vet. And correct me if I'm wrong here, especially for those Joe, working vets, the dog's temperature generally runs at 101. Is that correct? And when we took Mitt in, his temperature was 93. Just severely crashed. And we told him, the vet, his history and what had happened the last time, which was they put him on fluids, on an IV. They had him for 2 days.
Medications and stuff.
Yeah, yep. Some meds, and ultimately kind of put him in a bear hugger, warmed him up, and the little guy turned out okay. So we went the same route this time. It was a different vet, though. It was on the weekend, so our regular vet wasn't available. So they took him overnight, and we came the following day in hopes that he might look a little better, but in fact he looked even worse. More so than I was pretty surprised that he was looking even worse. So it was at that point that you're given many options, from ultrasounds and surgery, and just really making this exploratory case and finding out exactly what's going on. But to us, knowing his history, it wasn't something that we felt he was strong enough to go through, especially at the stage that he was at. And we actually consulted our personal veterinarian, and he agreed that it wasn't in our dog's best interest to go down that route. Now, we're also faced, as human beings, we're also faced with the fact that a stay could be anywhere from $600 to $5,000. It can add up really quick. On our side, unfortunately, we have the unfortunate experience of going through this many times. Not personally, but also with our clients, and it's yes, we are obviously still very emotional about this decision that we're going to make, but you also have to see the financial impact that it can have, and you have to be able to reason with that. So when the hospital is saying, well, we can do an ultrasound, and we can look for this, and we can look for that, that's just one thing. That's exploratory. We're not talking about his leg is broken, and so we're going to pin it, and then we're going to cast it, and it's going to be 6 weeks, and it's not a linear problem. We don't know what the problem is exactly, but what we can do is this, and those things that they can do add up. And most of us, I would like to think, maybe we're different, most of us aren't in a position to drop a few $1,000s at any given point in time. It's money that you have to come up with quickly. It's money that they expect. It's not something that you make payment plans on. Although there are options for that in the terms of insurances, pet insurance now. But ultimately, what it came down to was we had to make the decision to put Mitt down, and Joe was holding him, and they came in and they gave him the euthanasia, and he quickly went to sleep. That's the actual process of euthanizing your dog. Outside of the emotional part of it, you'll always, or you should always, be asked if you've been presented with this before, and the doctor gives their 2-minute spiel on what happens. And for those listening, usually it starts with a sedative. They usually give the dog a sedative, and it depends on the dog too. And then once the dog is calmed down, then they come in with the other part, which stops the heart. And it's not long. It's not arduous. It's a very, very quick process. And I'd say between the time that the doctor injected the drug to the point that Mitt had left us, considering he was a little 10-pound dog, less than a minute. It's super quick. But there's options, and that's what this podcast is all about. It's about the options that we have as owners, and we like to consider ourselves realistic thinkers, and in that we also have to take into consideration the financial impact that comes with going to the veterinarian as
well. So my overall experience from 23 years of dog stuff and working in the veterinary industry, there were a couple of things that happened through this journey of MIT that really made me start thinking about owners don't really feel like they have a choice. And it becomes very overwhelming. When we initially took MIT in, and I understand the position of the veterinarians and where they're coming from, but from a pet owner's point of view, sometimes you feel like you don't have a choice because they throw so much at you so fast. And so, being the position that I'm in, I'm listening to it all and have a better idea than most people going in with an emotional piece in their mind that all of a sudden there's this blood test and 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 we're going to do this blood test. And she threw there was a lot of blood testing of, and I understand what we need to understand and what I know we need to do to figure out where his red blood cell count was and all of that. But we didn't need to go through some of the testing that she was throwing at. And I understood what those are, but you as a client can say, wait a minute, what are these and what are they going to tell us? And that's one thing that we don't stop and ask is what is it going to tell us? What is an ultrasound going to tell us? And then if it is that, well, whatever we find out from it, he wasn't strong enough to go through surgery anyway. And so, to feel like, well, I don't have a choice, so I guess, go through. I want to save my dog versus take the time to question what each test is and what they're looking for and why. It's okay to ask that. It's okay to question the veterinarians, not what their job is and if they're doing their job right, because they should know what they're doing if they're in that position, but they should be willing to educate you as clients as to why. And so then we were able to make an educated decision on the direction that we were going to go in. And then the next day when I had called to check in on Mitt and let them know what time we were going to come in, as she was giving me an update, she threw this random, and oh, by the way, we did a parvo test, and of course it came back negative. And I said, I'm not paying for that parvo test because if you were initially worried about that, then you should have run it in the beginning and he should have been put in isolation. And of course it's negative, and you didn't call and consult me first and say, we think that it might be parvo, can we run the test? So I wasn't willing to pay for something that I was not informed of. And you really have to drive that home. I understand that there's emergencies and there's things to take care of, but you as a pet owner have to ask questions and you have to understand it before everything just starts happening. And I'm not trying to attack the vet clinics and the veterinarians at all. I just feel like when we are in an emotional situation, we're not there to be thinking through this whole process, and it's hard.
You have the experience going into a veterinary clinic where you're definitely not ignorant to what happens in those environments. But touch on the parvo test for just a second, because I personally don't think that I would just go, oh, you did a parvo test. Okay, good. Well, I know what parvo is, but maybe you can touch on that and why it was, if you will, a red flag for you.
So I'll let Shannon touch on kind of the parvo side of things. Why it was a red flag, why they ran it, or well, we knew going in this was a history for Mitt, so it wasn't something that out of the blue. He's also an older dog. They can still get parvo as an older dog, but it's not as common. And if there's anything that is contagious, that they think that they might be contagious, they should have isolated him and really went down that path first, because parvo is highly contagious. And so and that's why it sent a red flag to me, like in the midst of all of this today, where he hasn't been isolated, he's been amongst the general population, and then we run a parvo test, was just kind of an odd test to me out of the blue.
Gotcha.
Parvo is a highly contagious virus that attacks the lining of the intestine.
Mm-hmm.
So the symptoms are bloody diarrhea, and the dogs tend to just crash really fast with it because it's so aggressive. It's a very, very tough virus where in that it can live on just surfaces like your table on the ground for like 6 months, up to 6 months after it's exposed to that area. So if you have a dog that has parvo, most veterinarians will recommend don't get another puppy for at least a year after, because that virus will be in your house, on your counter, on your floor, on your sofa, and your new puppy will get it.
Yeah.
Puppies are really, really susceptible to it. That's why the parvo vaccination is one of the initial multi-booster vaccinations they get. And some breeds of dogs are extremely, extremely susceptible to parvo as well. So, certain breeds are more susceptible to it. So, if you suspect that a dog has parvo when it's brought into the hospital, you take it immediately to isolation. You don't let the dog wait in the lobby. You don't really want the people to go in the room and sit in the room, because you're having all kinds of other patients of all kinds of ages in and out of the hospital all day, and that virus will be on the surfaces. So if you think a dog has parvo that came in the waiting room, there's really stringent disinfectant rules to clean the hospital so that other patients that come in are safe from not being exposed to that disease. So there's lots of stringent rules to protect other patients, and especially where the emergency is really high traffic. Yeah.
And is that virus airborne? Is it contact?
Contact, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So other experiences, Shannon, as far as how clients should approach coming into the veterinary hospitals, what advice would you give them? Just in general, not even necessarily dealing with emergencies or anything that just.
So just like picking a vet, how you pick the vet, I think it is sometimes helpful to take recommendations from your friends.
Mm-hmm.
I find it personally most useful to go and visit the vets, just pop into their office, see what the office is like, see how their waiting room is, see how the receptionists treat people. Say that you're a new person and you're thinking about coming to that vet, and could you meet the doctor? Could you have a tour of the hospital? Most veterinary hospitals will, say, oh, well, the doctor's in an appointment, but if you just wait a few minutes, as soon as they're ready, we'll have them come out and meet you. Mm-hmm. Oh, something might be going on, in our treatment area. As soon as that's finished, we'd be happy to give you a tour. Most veterinary places are happy to give you a tour. They're happy to let you meet their staff. They're happy to let you see where your dog is going to be staying. If the doctor's too busy to come and meet you, if the staff is rude, if it looks really dirty and they won't let you go in the back, don't go there.
Yeah.
And then once you do find a place that you want to go, you might want to see if it's a multi-doctor practice. You might want to have an appointment with each of those doctors, because it's a relationship with another person in your life, right?
Yep.
You have a relationship with the dog trainer that helps you, and if you don't get along with them, that's not going to work out for you.
Right.
If you have a relationship with the doctor and you're not getting along with them, that's not in the best interest of your pet. People all have different personalities. They have different ways of communicating, and you need to find someone that you can communicate with well so that you can get the best care for your pet. So go and meet a lot of different doctors, and then when you find one you like, stick with them.
Yep.
Part of it is, you need to be responsible for your care and be able to question, but you get to a point where you don't want to question everything the doctor's telling you all the time, right? You want to be able to trust them. You're going to them for their experience and their knowledge. And if you can't trust that they're going to recommend to you what is in the best interest of your pet, you can't go to them.
Right.
So there's different doctor philosophies, doctors that will just explain everything in the world of medicine that you could do.
Yep.
Maybe you like that, and you like to know all the reasons and pick exactly everything that's going to happen to your pet based on all the choices in the world. Great, go to that doctor.
Right.
Maybe you want a doctor that's like weeds through the information for you and only tells you things they think are relevant. Yeah. Not everything out in the world, but only what's relevant to your situation and why. I tend to be that kind of person that likes that kind of doctor. Yeah. You know, that says, I think these things are relevant and we can choose from them. And there's all this other stuff out in the world, but we really don't need to worry about that. Yeah. Only worry about these couple things and choose, you know. And then there's other doctors that just want to tell you just like the minimum things that they think you need to get by. And some people really like that. Yeah. They don't want to worry about all of the choices or know all the science. They just want to know the minimum things that they need for their dog to get by. And all of these philosophies are fine. Yep. And it's your personal choice what philosophy you follow. But if you find a doctor that has the same philosophy that you do, you'll always get the care that you want for your pet.
I agree. Because if it was on normal business hours, we would have taken Mitch to our regular vet and we would have dropped him off at him. Oh,
yeah. So when you're in a weird situation, right? Yeah. When you're really emotional and you go to the vet, you need to bring someone with you that's an advocate. Like when you go into the hospital and you're going to have surgery and you bring your mom or your sister or whatever to be your advocate while you're undergoing the surgery, you might need to bring someone with you to the vet like that. That's not having an emotional response, that knows your dog and sort of knows what's going on with them so they can help you decide, you know, when you're in an emotional state or you're having a hard time, or you're going, maybe you usually go to a vet that's the minimalist, right? And then the vet you have to see at the emergency room is the everything in the world. You need someone to help you weed through the everything in the world stuff because you're not used to that, because that's not what you usually go to. So I think if you take someone with you that can help you be an advocate for your dog, then you'll have a more successful emergency experience, maybe.
Michelle, what overall experiences have you had vet-wise?
Oh man, I don't even think I have just a regular vet that I go to because I've been to so many. Luckily, knock on wood, I've never had like a major emergency that I've needed to actually like trust somebody like you guys did a couple weeks ago. That being said, I mean, Murphy did have some issues when he was younger that we did have to go to specialists and stuff like that. And I think those were the hardest ones to go to. Because they didn't have to have bedside manner. They were specialists. Right. So they just wanted to get the, like, whatever was going on with him at that point, like, fixed. I think they were by far the hardest, but at the same time, I kind of had to just stop and trust them because I had no idea what they were talking about. That being said, our regular vet that we were seeing at that point was great, and he helped kind of figure out, like, decipher between them and us what we should do and what was going on. I have changed vets, oh my gosh, probably 7 times in the past 9 years that I've had my personal dogs. And there are some that, like, I love that I would go back to for one dog and not the other, which is really interesting. I used to have a female vet that my Papillon loved. I loved her as a person, but as a vet, I didn't actually really love her. But Rambo, who was kind of picky with people, it was really nice that taking him somewhere that he felt comfortable. So really, I mean, honestly, the only advice I can really give is that it's your comfort level, and don't be afraid to get a second opinion. I get second opinions all the time with my dogs. Like I said, I don't really have a regular vet. This last vet, it's kind of an embarrassing story, but Murphy ate my underwear, and we can touch on that for a sec. That was probably the best vet experience I've ever had because they like slowed down and actually gave me my options in like, hey, we're going to try this. This is what we think is going on. And then we would try that, and it was like a couple hours later, they would call me back and give me something else. Like, it was not all at once, and it was, which was a great experience. That being said, the financial stuff is really interesting with that story because at first we didn't know what was going on with him. He was just extremely sick, and they did x-rays, and we couldn't find anything, so we didn't think it was a blockage.
What if you don't mind being extremely sick, what kind of symptoms was he showing?
So we went camping, and Murphy never eats when we go camping, so it wasn't weird that he didn't eat. But we exhausted him on that camping trip. Like, we ran him, and he got extremely lethargic while we were up there. And at that time, we were just like, it's because he's tired and he's not eating. And then when we came home, he threw up a couple of times the day we got home, and he was still so tired. And then the next day, he like, even when we got home, he wouldn't eat. He was so lethargic, wouldn't get up, just not his normal self at all. You could just tell he was really, really sick. He went 8 days without eating anything.
Wow.
We were, at that time, at first they thought it was pneumonia. Then they thought he might have possibly bloated, but he's had the gastroplexy, so he didn't fully actually torsion. So we were trying different types of antibiotics. We were shoving them down his throat with peanut butter, just trying to get something in his system. And finally, it dawned on me. I was like, he used to eat underwear all the time. Maybe I should check my underwear drawer. And there was a pair missing.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's got to be what it is. So at that point, we had two options. We could do an ultrasound that was going to cost us quite a bit of money, or we could just do exploratory surgery. And I was 99% sure what was going on at that point. So we decided to do exploratory surgery. I did get a lot of grief from people that I was willing to cut open my dog when I wasn't 100% sure. But financially, I just couldn't justify doing that. Like, it wasn't worth it when I knew what was happening. It actually ended up being really, really awesome. We took him in. He was supposed to go into surgery at noon, but that clinic had a emergency dog came in that went into heart failure and stuff, so they had to operate on that dog first. And he pooped them out in that time between, they called me at like 1 and they're like, so, everything's great. So he didn't have to have surgery in the end, so it actually ended up being really, really awesome. That being said, looking back at that experience, it was scary that he didn't eat for that long. And I mean, I'm sure Shannon can tell you, like, having a blockage, he probably could have died that time. He was sick. Like, he was really sick. So it was really scary, and I do wish we would have figured things out a little bit faster than we did. But you do have options. Like, there was a point we were going to take him to a second vet because we had no idea, like, what was going on. So don't be afraid to get a second opinion.
Yeah, I think it also helps, even talking with other friends that have dogs, not them giving medical advice and telling you what should happen, but to ease yourself, maybe. I know Michelle and I mean, Shannon, what's his doctor's number? And you and I have a conversation like, I get a second opinion. Like, that's really, weird. And, we've kind of talked a little bit about the dogs eating the cat litter and what happens with that. And you don't know that they're eating the cat litter. And we had that with Smokey and all, bunch of blood tests later because, I mean, her hair's falling out. She's and come to find out she was getting the cat box, and we figured that and solved that, and now she's totally fine. So, but, I think it helps to talk and do have somebody that can help. But also, I feel like, I have you guys to say, hey, I can't get to the vet. Can you go, or can you help me, or what do you think? And so, because sometimes because of experience, I don't know that that's always a good thing to have. And so having somebody go, I don't know, Joe, you should probably, have that checked, or, because sometimes we get like, that'll be fine. They're tough. We know our dogs. And then we go, that was not a good choice, and nothing that's ever been life-threatening, but, you get a cut paw and you go, we'll be fine. And then 2 days later you feel guilty because we still have a flap that's happening or something. But, I think talking with other dog owners just to kind of, get different opinions, different vets for different things, I think is totally fine. Different vets for different dogs, I think is totally fine. I've come across some veterinarians that hate German Shepherds. That's fine. I'll go someplace else, but I don't hold a grudge about it. But it's definitely search out, talk to the vets. What's your favorite breeds? What's your, what do you think? I've had some vets that get really up in people's face because they need to get this dog trained, or you're going to be in serious trouble. And really the dog's fine, but the veterinarian feels really empowered because it's a certain breed, or, they're manifesting things, or, and so it's finding that balance of what's good and what's bad. we've had, a couple of experiences that we've walked away from and just said we're going to go someplace else.
Rainbow, my Papillon, got bit once, and at the time I was actually out of town, but the person was watching him took him to the vet, and I'm not going to bash on this vet, so I'm not going to say a name, but they took him and they had him there for like 12 hours and didn't even look at him, and then like I flew in that night and called them because they were closing. They're like, oh, we haven't even had time to look at him, and they looked at him, and then they figured out he had completely had a hole through his leg, so they had to sedate him and like put tubes in and like all of this stuff that I was so upset that like he'd been in pain all day.
Yeah.
And you guys didn't do anything, so we don't go back to that vet.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's totally fine. Like if you have a bad experience, like find a new vet.
Yeah. Yep.
Shannon, your experience in the veterinary world, there's some hospitals, and maybe all of them, and that's why I'm asking this question, but there's accreditation for veterinary hospitals, clinics. Can you talk a little bit about those? As I understand it, you can be a veterinarian, not be accredited, and still practice. You don't have to have accreditation to practice.
That's correct. And you can still follow the guidelines of the accreditation and not actually have the accreditation. So the accreditation places that do that, you actually pay them a fee to come and inspect your hospital and say, oh yes, they're following our guidelines. So any good hospital will follow the guidelines, and you can look up the guidelines for the accreditation on the internet so you know what they are, and you can go in and ask them, the veterinarian, questions about their office to find out about it, like if they're following the guidelines. Does that make sense? Like ask them questions and see if the answer they give you is what the guideline is, right? There are lots and lots of good veterinarians that follow those guidelines, and they just don't want to pay the fee to have the accreditation, and so they don't pay the fee, but they still practice good medicine. So what I would do is look up what the guidelines are, go when you visit the hospital and look for those things.
Is there more than one accreditation, or is there one governing body?
The major one is the American Animal Hospital Association. Is that right? AHA is the thing. So that's the biggest one. And I think they have a monopoly on accreditation.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, and the nice thing with AHA is, and any accreditation is really, it's about, but they do have to teach their staff. They do have to have certain things and following those certain rules. And we have helped several veterinary hospitals meet the accreditation of bite prevention and safety of animal handling. And it is a service that we offer for free. And so I think, all of us talking here, we've been in vet hospitals and we've been behind the doors and we kind of get to share a little piece of them, and it's a lot of fun to see and get to know veterinarians and their perspective of things as well, and hoping that within the next month here or so we'll have a couple of veterinarians on our show as well to talk about them and get to know them and some of their philosophies. So again, this is not a show on not to go to the veterinarian because veterinarians are important, but it's about empowering you as dog and cat and horse and everything else owners that's out there, that you have the right to ask questions and you have a right to make the decision that's going to be best for you and your pet. Some of us are a little bit more sensitive than others. Some of us have seen dogs suffer more than others, and nobody should point fingers until you're in your own shoes, and the decisions that you make have to be for you. What one person sees an old dog should be put to sleep is not how maybe the owner sees it, and you have to accept that decision. But everybody has a right to ask questions, and everybody has a right to make the choice that's going to be best for the dog and for you emotionally and your pocketbook, because that plays a big role in it. So, is there anything else anybody wants to add to? Okay. Well, don't forget to log on to our website, www.wsk9co, and you can log on and see our blog and our new website of online doggy classes. Thanks. Thank you for listening. If you want to know more about us and our services, please visit our website at www.wsk9co.com. And as always, we urge you to get out and train.